This is January 22nd. I'm Caitlin Gregory of Mr. Rosel's Living History class, and I'm here today with Mrs. Heidi Cole. So, when and where were you born?
I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, 1920, March 7th, 1920.
How did you become involved with Girl Scouts?
When I was 10, we moved to Niagara Falls, New York, and Girl Scouts, I hadn't been a scout up till then. The Girl Scouts and Sunday school at church were two good ways to meet friends. And so I joined a Girl Scout troop at the age of 10.
You've been a Girl Scout ever since?
Yes, I am. A registered and active Girl Scout. I go to meetings. Saratoga sort of adopted me recently, and they come pick me up, bring me home, because I don't drive that far anymore. It's been a wonderful way of having friends.
Can you describe your life shortly before the war started?
I was in high school, and I don't think we thought very much about the war. Right after I went to college at Cornell, and after graduation, that's when I really began to think about it, because they upped our graduation 2 weeks because the boys were all being drafted.
Right.
And so when I went, my first job was in professional Girl Scouting at Syracuse, and I began to think about it, and I thought, oh, we befriended a gal from the Waves, and their uniform was so neat. So I went to apply for the Waves, but I got turned down, and this is the humorous part, because I didn't have the right number of teeth. When I was 7, 8 years old, I had abscessed teeth, and they took 4 of them out.
Wow.
So my boss said to me, go across the street and sign up for the Red Cross. And I did, and 2 weeks later I was headed for training and headed for overseas in a couple months. So it was best.
What were you studying before you left?
I was studying I was in the home economics college, but I was majoring in nursery school and parent education.
Where were you and what went through your mind on December 17th, 1941?
I was in Detroit, Michigan at the Merrill Palmer School on a scholarship from Cornell. And I can remember on Sundays, there were 33 of us from all over the United States at the school. And on Sundays we had to entertain the General Motors boys for dinner. And I remember we were sitting in the living room talking, and we heard about the war.
How did you feel? Like, what was your reaction to it?
I think the boys were more concerned than we girls were, you know.
Right.
And they were boys that we just met that day, so you know we weren't attached to it was a big happening. We knew that.
What exactly does a recreation worker do?
Well, we had a lot of fun. We planned parties for the boys, delivered newspapers in the morning, and you know, you'd go around saying, who's from St. Louis, you know. It was, our job as recreation Red Cross workers was to bring a little joy into their lives. I remember one patient who said, "Oh, don't come near me. It's all you try to do is make us homesick." And pay attention to him. Later, another day, I found on a bed near his cone-shaped hat, like out of construction paper, two of them. One said, "You're okay, thanks a lot." And he was the one who, when it came to New Year's, they had blue corduroy bathrobes, and he had pinned his up so it looked like a tuxedo. He had taken towels and pleated them and put them in. So that was his way of saying, okay.
Did your family know what you were doing?
Yes.
How did they deal with you being away from home?
At that time, I was taking care of my mother, not physically, but monetarily. And my brother and sister were both married and had children, but when I told them what I wanted to do, they said, "Go ahead, we'll take care of Mom." I mean, physically she wasn't ill or anything, but I was the unmarried one living at home. But we had been away, all of us had gone away to college, and so she was used to, my father had died.
So when did you leave to go overseas?
I left in February, and I went on the Queen Mary, but the Queen Mary was stripped of everything. The only chairs and tables were in the dining room. We sat on the floor to play cards.
I remember you telling me that you had to zigzag across the sea.
She was too fast to have an escort. Yeah,
right.
So we were chased by Germans.
Were you scared?
Well, it was all kind of exciting.
Right, new.
Yeah.
And what sort of training did you have before you left?
We trained in Washington, D.C. at American University, and they trained us, in the, the ranks and what the Army was like and what war was like. We had classes. We went every day for, I think it was 6 weeks, and then we went to Bowling Green, Virginia, to an Army base, and got our shots. And I remember big, tall fellows coming out, practically fainting, after getting their shots. But and while in Bowling Green, then we were introduced to club work and things like that, to what we were going to do.
Right. So did you work with the club mobiles? Or?
No, I didn't. When I landed in England, and there were 100 of us in that group that went at that time, and this Red Cross officer gave this big spiel about they needed hospital workers, so I decided I would volunteer. And as I said, when I had my interview, and I love the name Annie Laurie Baker, she was the interviewer, and I said, well, why? Because I was too young in the States and I really wanted hospital work. She said, because of your Girl Scout background. So it all worked out for the best.
Right. How long were you in England?
I was in England for 11 months during the war and the bombing. And then I signed up for occupation, what they called the occupation, when we occupied Europe.
Right.
And I was in Belgium for 9 months during the occupation. And while I was in England, and I was in Wales, and it was a tent hospital. Everything was intense.
What was that like to be in a tent hospital?
Well, I was kind of used to tents being a Girl Scout.
Right.
And I had directed camps for a few years, so it was interesting.
What did you talk about with your friends there?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember. Probably what we used to do. I remember my first night, excuse me, in Wales. These three, excuse me, these three army boys came knocking at my door, tent door, and said, "We're taking you to London." I still hear from those boys.
Oh, good.
And I've spent a week with one of them in the state of Washington a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
They took me to London. We went horseback riding.
Oh. So, would you say that they're the person that sticks out in your mind as far as who you got close to there, or let's see. How much of a difference was there for you transitioning from a tent hospital to the nice facility in Belgium?
It was quite different. And in Belgium, I was in Charleroi, and it was near a city.
Mm-hmm.
And I had use of city volunteers to put on program. We put on a tea at Easter time and so on. But whereas in Wales, we were out in the country.
Right.
And we did have Red Cross volunteers, British Red Cross volunteers who worked with us and helped us.
What's one of the major events that you helped plan that you remember best?
Say that again?
What's one of the major events that you helped put together that you remember best?
Well, let me see. Probably that Easter Sunday. Gathering of local people and the soldiers and the patients, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We'd wheel them down in their beds and their wheelchairs. And the other thing I do remember too is one New Year's, we planned a New Year's party for the patients.
Mm-hmm.
The officers came, wanted to know if they could come to our party because we were having more fun. One time I had them for Easter. Do you remember making a little basket when you were in kindergarten?
Yeah.
Folding 16 squares? And
Mm-hmm.
well, I had the fellas doing that. And they were laughing about it. But then I had been issued red and green paper at Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I had, their tissue paper during the year. And so I had them cutting up green paper to make grass. And they just thought it was fun, you know. Foolish but fun. And then I got the kitchen that Easter to boil eggs for me.
Oh.
And some of the women in town brought me some dye.
Mm-hmm.
So we dyed eggs.
Cool.
And so I filled baskets for the patients and took them around at midnight, and you know, you'd think they were sleeping. Thanks a lot. Oh, that's nice. Things like that were fun, to bring a little bit of home
Right.
to them. And I planned a winter carnival one time, and I made like ski hills on paper,
Uh-huh.
and our skiers were pencils stuck in marshmallows. I mean, you devise everything.
Right, you get creative.
Yeah, it was fun.
Was it hard to see some of the patients, like, in their condition, like, to spend time with
Yes.
them?
You know, there's one especially I remember. I was delivering papers one morning, and he was encased in bandages from head to toe.
Mm-hmm.
and he saw his little eyes looking out, and his nose, and a place for his mouth. But he was happy to be there.
Right.
Some of them went back to the front, some of them went home.
Mm-hmm. So, was your husband involved in the war?
Yes, but I wasn't married when I was
Right.
overseas. My husband served in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was it was interesting because he had rheumatic fever as a senior in high school,
Uh-huh.
and his mother was crying, and the doctor said, "Don't worry, Mrs. Cole, your son will never see the war." And he was drafted.
Oh, wow. So, although it was wartime, do you have any fond or happy recollections from the period?
Say that again.
Although it was wartime, do you have any fond recollections of the time period?
I had a wonderful experience serving in the Red Cross. I wouldn't ask for it again under those circumstances, but I had a wonderful experience. I got to travel, in England on 3 days, a 3-day pass. You could get all over England. You didn't have to ask for special weeks pass, which you could only have 1 or 2 of. In Belgium, I got to travel, and before I came home, through the GI program, I had a week in Switzerland,
Oh, nice.
and I went with 3 nurses. I wanted to ski and they wanted to sightsee, so we chose a tour that was 3 days at Zermatt to ski and 3 days sightseeing.
That's cool.
So that was, at the end, there were opportunities to do that. I had an opportunity to visit friends of my family in France, and I met with this lady that I grew up calling Aunt Mary. She was French. I'm not French, but she had served in the First World War and had met my uncle and had come over and visited my family and my grandmother's family. So I visited her. I called her Aunt Mary. She was doing the same thing I was. She was with the French Red Cross, and she was doing like what I was doing, recreation work. But her job was to take train loads of wine to the French soldiers. It was very interesting. But I visited her and got to meet her husband, whom I had never met. And she showed movies to me that she had taken when the Germans had burned her village.
Oh, wow.
And then her husband buried the film, and so it was never confiscated.
Wow.
I thought that was interesting. He also buried bottles of wine, which he brought out when I was there. It was interesting.
Do you recall your feelings when FDR died?
I think we were all felt a loss.
Right.
Yeah.
So where were you when the war finally ended?
When the war ended in Europe, I was in southern England outside of Southampton, and I was serving in an American hospital which was an annex to the big British hospital. And when VE Day came, the war in Europe was over, the boys in the British hospital were celebrating. Our boys wouldn't celebrate because they realized we had to go on to win the war in Japan.
Right.
I can remember that night. The British burned mattresses. They just celebrated, and our boys just stood there.
Wow.
So I can remember that night.
So how were you feeling about the whole thing? Were you having mixed emotions, or were you happy, or?
Well, I wonder what was coming next.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, our outfit was sent to Bournemouth, England, which is like Atlantic City here.
Mhm.
And we staged there, but we knew we were going someplace because we had our teeth fixed, our eyes checked, our haircuts, everything to get ready to go on. But as the war ended, then we went back outside of Southampton to where we had been, and the boys went home and I went on. But we discovered we were headed for the China-Burma India Theater,
Oh.
but we didn't go.
What do you think about Truman's decision to use atomic force against Japan?
Say that again.
How do you feel about Truman's decision to use atomic force in Japan?
It was scary. I think it was exciting / scary because it could happen any place.
Right.
Got more time?
When you returned home, did you find that the war had changed you in any way?
I think I had grown up a lot. I was ready for new ventures,
Mm-hmm.
and I had experienced a lot. I had made many new friends, and just some of them I still have to this day, and that's what, 65, 70 years.
Was there anything specifically that you learned from the war, like a lesson or like something about humankind?
I think I learned that people are important, and friendships are great.
Okay. What time is it?
Just have 7 minutes.
I don't have any more questions for you, but
Can I share with you what I
yeah.
brought? Would that be all right too?
Mhm.
Do you want me to hit this button?
Yeah. But thank you so much.